Well, here we are, three blokes who used to work together, and we've all got our lockdown hair at the moment. And I guess when I think about it, one of the things that we never used to talk about was mental health. And I know, Mark, this is something that you feel quite passionately about, and is close to your heart.
Yeah, that's right. So I guess a bit of background. I'm happy to talk about my mental health, and I think that's important. But I guess that wasn't always the case. I've had episodes of anxiety and depression and panic attacks on and off, more off than on, thankfully, throughout my adult life. And certainly, like the first time it happened, my strategy once I recovered was to pretend it had never happened. And hope it would never happen again, which would have been a fantastic strategy, but turned out to be a pretty crap strategy because it did happen again. And so I think each time I learned a little bit more about myself and what helped. So I think looking for warning signs was something that I would do, and it's a difficult balance because you can over obsess sometimes and push yourself into some of those difficulties. I think as later on I learned that actually one of the big things that helped me is to talk about it. So from a personal level, helps me to be able to share my feelings and go on that. And then I sort of realised actually it helps a lot of other people if I talk about it. I think it is a difficult thing to talk about. In the past, there was a lot of stigma about it, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a subject that's actually much more relevant than we think it is. I think there's a lot of people suffer from this, so particularly anxiety and panic attacks, than we probably know. I mean, I had my first panic attack probably 15, 20 years ago. I was driving into work on the A47 at the time, and I thought I was having a heart attack. My hands went tingly, my vision started to go, and being a bloke, I just carried on in the outside lane because I thought, well, it'll go away. And I went into the office, and one of my colleagues, the first thing they said to me was, "God, you look awful." And I didn't know what had happened. I went home, and the doctor said, ironically, he said, "Oh, you've just had a panic attack." And I think I thought for a genuine second there, I thought I was gonna die, because they are, if you're not aware of what they are, they're immensely frightening experiences. And I think, I have a maxim that I use when I'm talking about change. I call it the change monster under the bed, but I think anxiety is a bit like that. If you let it just live under the bed and you don't talk about it, it just gets worse and worse. Yeah. It's like the shark in Jaws, this is something I use quite a lot. When the first half of the film, when you don't see the shark, it's terrifying. But when you see the shark, it's actually a big rubber shark, and you think, oh, it's not quite so frightening. And I think getting it out of your own head and talking about it is really therapeutic.
I can definitely relate to that, particularly with the panic attacks. So there was something that I had the early episodes of anxiety and depression, but from then on, actually, it was more the fear of panic attacks, which was really affecting my life, and to the point where I would avoid situations that I thought I might get anxious because I just really feared having a panic attack, and that was really life limiting. Doing that, both on a social side of things and career as well. I think it's sort of like it held me back from taking opportunities, and I think those sorts of things, when you do hold back from those things, that can often lead to depression as well, because you're not going out there and finding those things. So for panic attacks, well, the big breakthrough for me, really, I'll just explain it. The panic attacks that I had weren't what you described, where it was felt like you were having a heart attack. Those are more common. Mine was a form which I then found out was something called derealization, depersonalization, and basically I thought I was going mad.
Right.
The sensations of the world felt different. It's quite difficult to explain, but the sense of time was wrong. Your sense of your position in space is wrong. Your arms and legs, they don't feel like they belong to you, and it really, really scary. As all panic attacks, but I seriously thought I was going mad. And my mum had a history of mental illness and in and out of psychiatric hospital, and I just thought, that's where I'm going. I'm going mad, and I'm going out there, and so do anything to avoid them. And I had some therapy with on the NHS, and in one of those sessions, a panic attack was starting to build up, and the therapist sort of wanted me to go with it and just, you're in a safe environment, and I just couldn't do it. I refused. I broke down into tears, and I did all the techniques I could to distract and to fight against it. And so when I finally calmed down, it was near the end of the session. He said, right, next session we're going to talk about panic attacks. And she explained to me that the panic attacks I was having was something called either depersonalization, derealization. And it's the first time that they'd had a name. And I went and had a look at what that was about, and I thought, oh, this is a real thing that happens to people. It's not just me. And it took a lot of the power away from those panic attacks, just me understanding a bit more about them. The other big breakthrough was that she did finally persuade me to go with one of the panic attacks. And what she explained to me to do was to say that really panic attacks work. They build on the fear themselves. Basically, if you feel frightened from them, you're putting more adrenaline into the system, and it's going to build and build and build. There's only so long that can last for, because your body will sort of just will break down. It's just too much for it. But what I found is when she advised me to basically observe and use some sort of mindfulness type of techniques and observe what was going on. And so next time I had a panic attack, so about 5 in the morning, I was lying in bed and I could feel one coming on, and I thought, I'll go with this. It wasn't comfortable by any means, and I had the same sorts of sensations, but that edge of fear had sort of gone away because I'd learned a bit more about it, and I was using some of these techniques, and I just observed it and I felt it, and it wasn't comfortable, but it didn't go that further point where I was in complete panic. And it gradually subsided. And honestly, since then, I've not had that same fear of panic attacks, and I've not had a full-blown panic attack since.
Yeah, I mean, just all this conversation takes me right back to when I was younger, and I remember going to church with my dad, and more often than not, I used to faint in church, and there was no particular reason for it. You know, I wasn't particularly hot, or I hadn't had my breakfast or something like that. But then the fear built up, and I was only, from being about a 9-year-old to being about a 15-year-old, it was that sort of period. But I used to end up always sitting at the end of the bench, because I didn't want that situation where I was starting to feel dizzy, as I called it, where I was inside the bench. And then the thought of having to squeeze past people because I couldn't get out of the bench quick enough before I fainted would make me panic even more. And there were occasions, even in my early 20s, when when I was in church, or it started then happening in a theatre or a cinema, wanted to always sit on the outside because you couldn't sit on the inside, because if you're on the outside, and it was strange, you were still in the same environment, you were still kind of, prone to faint or not, because you'd eaten or you hadn't eaten. But it was purely the fact that if you were sat on the outside, you knew that you could get out quickly, and that stopped you panicking. And
I've had exactly the same. I think for me, when panic attacks were a real problem for me, things like public transport was an issue, more so than in a private car. The big thing for me was if I was with someone and I'd been able to talk to them about it, and so they knew, that made a massive difference. And generally, if that was the case, they knew that I might have a panic attack. That meant that I generally didn't, because I wasn't thinking about, what if I have a panic attack, what would I do now, and that fear sort of building up. So that helped massively. So again, a good reason to talk about these things.
I think that's a really good point, that kind of being open and honest about it. I mean, the last panic attack I had was about 2 weeks ago, and I talked about it on the blog on our Comfortable Trauma site about it was at Addenbrooke's Hospital. I was waiting for an MRI, and they told me I was going to possibly need an injection to have the old contrast dye put in. Now, I can deal with needles when I'm ready for them, but when I get an unexpected needlage event, it can trigger me, and I could feel my feet starting to tingle. And I said to Angela, I'm getting a bit panicky. My wife was with me, and then she said, well, breathe, do your breathing. So I didn't breathe, but then I felt my hearing start to go. The next thing is the tunnel vision. The next thing, I'm Sparko normally on the floor. So I said, right, my hearing's starting to go. So we just kept talking to each other, and that really helped me get it under control. And I think having those kind of mitigation strategies are really important. I mean, it's similar to me with my Parkinson's. Because Parkinson's is the result of lack of dopamine, which is a happy drug, happy chemical in the brain. When I'm particularly off with Parkinson's, that's when I'm more prone to the panic attacks. And I find because I feel vulnerable, because a lot of the time I can't actually do much physically to help myself. And, you know, it's like you said about planning where to sit. When I go to a restaurant, I always like to sit with my left side against the wall if I can, because this is normally my worst hand. So if I'm off, I can put it down by my side and keep it out of the way, and people won't see it. And we've now started, if you know, in the days when we used to go out, we may vaguely remember those times. I don't know, what was it, about a year and a half ago? But if I ever go to the theatre now or something like that, I always get a seat at the end of the row, because otherwise I feel vulnerable because I can't get up as quick as other people, or, you know, someone wants to go out and use the loo. So I have to plan ahead a lot more than I ever used to. And you know, that's predominantly about Parkinson's, but I think it applies to any kind of struggle you have with the condition. You know, if you can plan to take mitigating action if you need to, and also talk about it so people are aware of it, it does make a huge difference.